Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone for joining us. This is our Pride 2020 community chat with the Center on Colfax. We are doing this. So Fireside at 5 was created to bring people together during COVID and, to help people in isolation and quarantining to connect and just meet new people, have some meaningful conversations. So yeah, my name is Kai Walsh. I am the founder of Kai Consulting, a digital marketing consulting agency. And yeah, I go by they, them pronouns. I'm non-binary trans. And yeah, my why for this is just, I think every person has their own experience with coming out, coming to terms with who they are, and the community that they surround themselves with and the community they find. So me myself, I'm looking for more community, more queers to meet, and yeah, so this is kind of the first step towards that, and just making a difference through these meaningful conversations and meeting other people. So yeah, with that said, Johnny, I'm going to introduce you, and then from there you can introduce everyone else. Yeah, and so you can just go ahead and say your name, what you do, your pronouns, and then your why you're on the call.
Hey everybody, thanks so much, Kai. My name's Johnny Humphrey. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work at the Center on Colfax, and my role there is Director of Inclusivity Services. That sounds pretty fancy, pretty formal, but what I get to do on a daily basis is work with companies, nonprofit and government agencies, and anything inside and outside of that to provide best practices around supporting queer employees, queer consumers, queer patients, queer students, what have you. And it's really important to me as a member of the community to get to speak up and educate people who either have good intent and want to learn more, or people that are just not great and have been in situations where they are required to do better. Either way, I'm really just excited to be able to do what I do. And the why for me is just, I want to make a difference. I'm a student for life, so I'm continuing to learn about best practices to support our community, how to be more inclusive. And I just love learning and sharing, and hopefully enjoy this conversation today. So with that, I think I'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves, because I would never do justice. And so if we can go down, Lauren, if you'd like to start, I'd love to hear about you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Lauren. I live in Austin, Texas, and my pronouns are she, her. I work for Messina Touring Group, who is a partner of AEG Presents. We put on major concert tours, and I do digital marketing for them. So if you ever get an ad for a Taylor Swift concert, that was me. You're welcome. I am here because I know Kai. We met at South by a couple of years ago, and we've just kind of stayed in contact since, and they introduced me to Fireside at 5, and it just sounded super interesting. This is my first Fireside Chat, so very excited to learn and hopefully contribute in whatever way I can. But yeah, I'm kind of also just wanting to make a difference during this time, because we're in the midst of really a civil rights movement right now, and being able to contribute in whatever way I can is something that I'm really passionate about. And also just, meet new people in the community, and, learn about them and their stories. And yeah, that's kind of why I'm here.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going down my little queue here. So in my order, it looks like Leonard, would you mind introducing yourself to the group?
Yes, everyone can still hear me fine. I'm kind of paranoid about my microphone. My name is Leonard Pollard. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am currently a second-year law student at Colorado University. I'm an intern at the Colorado Name Change Project. We help trans people navigate and afford name changes. and I'm a judicial intern as well. And I forgot the last question. So
Your why? What's your why?
Kai invited me, and I mean that's enough of a why for me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. How about Lillian? How are you, Lillian?
Hi, hello, I'm well. Hi, everybody. My name is Lillian Robinson. She, her pronouns for me. I work up in Boulder. Well, I work remotely now, but I work up in Boulder. I'm an associate strategist at a company called Sterling Rice Group. So I do strategy work, design work, branding, new product innovation and creation for Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to like local Colorado startups. So I work on a bunch of different projects all the time, in and out. And I just love meeting new people. I'm also a comedian. So that kind of fuels me and drives me in life. Big people person. So that's definitely why I was interested in joining today, meet some new folks and have some interesting conversations. What's not to love with that?
That's
and so I love a stage. I miss being on stage. So this is just like a virtual stage for me. So thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. How about Veronica? Hey, Veronica, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Veronica Holyfield, and I go by she, her pronouns. And I am the creative director at Outfront Magazine. So we are Colorado's LGBTQ publication. I've only been here a year. However, our publication has been in print for 44 years. So we've been documenting a lot over the generations, and I just feel really fortunate to be a part of that. The reason that I'm here is I love stories. I love hearing stories. I'm a journalist at heart. I tend to ask more questions than I answer. Definitely more of an introvert, I would say. So these kinds of things might make me a little nervous. And I think that's the reason why, like, you put yourself out there, you have conversations, you learn things. So I'm just really excited to be here.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Someone who I know is David Duffield. I'm so excited to have you on the panel. How are you doing today, David?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you. Is this thing on?
It's on.
I'm new to Zoom. I'm sorry. I feel like we're having a Brady Bunch moment. That's the meme of the year. I feel like I'm going to do Marsha. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is David Duffield. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the history coordinator at the Center on Colfax and the creator of the Colorado LGBTQ History Project. My why is because Johnny baited me here with the twink, and no, I'm joking. Oh, see, she gets it. Thank you, Lillian. Much applause. We should do some stand-up sometime together. I am here because I found this really fascinating, and I'm curious to see how the Fireside Chats will go and to learn a little bit more about what all you do.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And JD, welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me. Doing well. So JD, he, him pronouns. I work for an online education technology company called 2U. They are headquartered out of the East Coast, but we are 7,000 people globally. So quite the big impact and footprint in regards to just leading the industry in online technology, especially through times like this. With 7,000 employees, you know, there's a lot of intersections for people in there. And my company has been really diligent in making sure that the employees have a voice, that they have the resources to make sure those voices and concerns are able to, you know, move up through the channels and not just be arbitrary, you know, appeasement. Little, you know, you had your BRN and here you go. So I think, you know, keeping with that intersectionality, it's great inside a company of that many people, but it's also great to interact with other people that are, you know, doing the same work in their organizations and what are those successes and failures that they might be happening.
That's awesome. Okay, Kai, I did my part. Thanks. Bye. No, just kidding.
Good one there, Johnny.
You're in charge.
No, seriously? Okay.
Do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thank you all for sharing. And again, so happy to have you guys here. So we will hop right into the first question. You know, this chat is about community. So with 51 years since Stonewall uprisings and, you know, which were started because of police brutality. I mean, just the fact that everything's colliding right now with COVID, Black Lives Matter, Pride movement, and Pride Month. You know, what does the Pride movement mean to you?
I'll chip in. I'll start in. I think in just kind of like keeping and echoing what I said in my introduction with my company, really trying to, you know, give the resources for the individuals that need, you know, a voice outside of where they've been generationally. Something within my own, so, you know, there's a queer resource network, there's a Asian Pacific Islander, a Black engagement network. So, you know, we have all of these different populations that are generally underrepresented, and something for my personal BRN that I take stakeholdership in and being in leadership capacity within the queer resource network. And I think echoing that with everybody is really having intentionally going into this month with that in mind of, you know, that this is our fight too, because we would have nothing without the people that are still continually being underrepresented this many decades later, this many generations later. I think that it's just crucial for us to come together in that.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Who else? I would say everyone's on mute, but I know that they've got a lot in their minds. I'm willing to jump in real quick. It's interesting because I think Pride, we fought, you know, we've been fighting for equal rights, for equality. We mourned losses. I mean, just thinking 4 years back, the Pulse shooting, I mean, you know, that happened right before a lot of Pride festivals. And so it was a time for us to come together and mourn the tremendous loss that you know, was experienced not only in Orlando, but throughout our country and really around the world. And then we celebrate marriage equality, you know, that took place as well. And, you know, certainly this year, you know, we recognize, you know, the Supreme Court ruling on employment, you know, protections around sexual orientation and gender identity. But we also recognize the fact that Black Lives Matter movement, the fact that, you know, people in our community, due to intersectionality, we're, you know, Black trans women are being murdered. You know, people of all colors are still being brutalized. And it, you know, certainly the movement that took place in the 1969 continues. So it's just a lot of different emotions, I think, each and every year. And so for me, it's just, you know, coming together and recognizing that we as a community have to work together, fight together, celebrate together to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. Absolutely. And I think too, intersectionality is such a big thing in 2020, and especially right now, you know, is just the Kimberly Crenshaw definition of intersectionality is when people experience oppression on multiple intersecting fronts. And, you know, I think that, Johnny, you said it well. You know, we have made a lot of progress with the Pride movement, but, you know, right now in particular, Black trans people definitely need our support, and, you know, our trans women of color, because, you know, transphobia is extremely prevalent right now, which we're seeing. Yeah. So, I mean, Pride for me, I think, you know, I said it in the quote at the top of the agenda, but, you know, it says, it feels important somehow that a pandemic abolished the old Pride and gave us a call to action, room to reimagine what it means to be queer and to act accordingly. So I think right now is, you know, just the right shake of events that we need to really start fighting for those injustices and the oppression and, you know, silenced voices and marginalized voices within our community, but just everywhere too. So
yeah, most definitely.
I would agree with that. I think it's been, while all the circumstances going on right now are like so unfortunate and awful, I think a silver lining is that we've had such a reset on Pride. Every year I feel like it's just, we have had those different kind of, milestones, Johnny, that you were talking about that have been huge and monumental. But it just has felt like an onslaught of like corporations just throwing rainbows at you. And to not have that this, month has been really refreshing, because it's just, it reorients us to what is really important. Like, why are we all here? What do we actually still need to fight for? And there's just so much more that we need to do. It's not like we got the, marriage equality in 2014 and we're, skating home free. So I think it's, one thing with all of us being online, not being out at like pride parades and things like that, instead being at protests, it's just been a nice kind of reframe and reset for a lot of people in my life. And I think the community at large, especially for white queers like myself, it's very, I think, important to kind of go back and be like, who threw the first brick at Stonewall? It was a Black trans woman, and a Black butch woman. So it's I don't know, everything is pretty awful all around, but I think I can get excited at least that we have an opportunity to really change things in the future and reframe pride in general.
I'd be interested to hear some other perspectives as well.
Yeah, totally.
Contribute?
Yeah. Kind of branching off of that. So what I didn't mention earlier is I actually used to intern at Out Youth, which in Austin is, yes,
I know that organization well.
Yes, they are awesome. So I used to actually be a marketing and operations intern there by day, and then at night I would go and help the youth. It's kind of a center for a bunch of LGBTQ youth to come together and create community and learn all of that. And so whenever I was there, it was actually whenever marriage equality happened, and it was interesting because I was in college, still learning a lot of, things in general. And, it was like, oh, great, marriage equality, awesome, we're done. And then, but then at the same time, we started doing campaigns saying we're not done yet. And so it kind of, just what y'all have been saying resonates with me in that way of, we've had these milestones, but we just have so much more to go. And I'm glad that this year is more along the lines of change and doing things rather than, throwing glitter and being like, yes, which is like, it's important to celebrate, and it's important to celebrate how far we've come, because we have come very far. But at the same time, there's still so many communities within the community that, need more representation and need, basic human rights, so yeah, that's kind of, it definitely resonated with me in that regard.
Anyone else want to share any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess mine is less concrete. I kind of don't know what it means to me right now. I feel like over the last few weeks, the news did kind of like that a wild shift from COVID to the protests. And kind of as we're shifting back, I realized that I kind of let myself get like swept up in, I guess, the ideal of revolutionary change. And like the protests are absolutely a good thing. The thing what they have achieved is extraordinary in every way. I guess, but like when I try to kind of, once we're going back into the reality of the pandemic, it's hard to stay in that mindset when I think about how us reopening means that the many of the Black people whom we were protecting are going to be much more at risk. They are 3 times more at risk for fatalities. And I guess this ties back to the Pride part, because I think my entire exposure to Pride throughout my life has been relatively corporate. And I think that there are good and bad things about that in general. But this is kind of giving me the realization that, like, kind of the vastness and the entrenchedness of the inequality that we have, and how much it will take to actually get a more broad and intersectional equality.
Yeah. Johnny, you want to? Yeah, well, I'll take it. That was definitely well said. I think,
Yeah.
We are seeing so much of that because, you're reading about all the populations that are more at risk, that are more vulnerable, and, young people can have zero symptoms and still, be contagious and infect other people and put other people's safety at risk. So I think that's a really great point. But, I think too, there is some silver lining / hope that I see in what you said is just, in order to know about a problem, you have to recognize the problem, or in order to solve the problem, you have to recognize the problem first. So I think, the more that we can unveil and uncover right now, I think the better off we're going to be, and just throwing it all out there and, really being able to just have actual conversations about it,
Yeah, and I've been with the center this is my 3rd year. And then when I was in Dallas, I worked at Resource Center. So that was another LGBT center. And that's why I know Out Youth specifically, because we made a lot of referrals and connected while I was in Dallas. It's a tricky conversation, and there's no easy answer about, corporate involvement. I mean, it's certainly, companies that are fighting for equality, and, so it's organizations and companies that are standing up, that are pushing for equality in the workplace. We certainly are very thoughtful about who participates. And then, those costs for those, that participation does offset some of the other costs, and for those celebration and those other types of things. But I understand both sides of it. And this year in particular, we had to flip quickly. And in the previous organization, we didn't host the event, but this one, our organization actually organizes it. So it's been interesting being directly connected instead of participating, but connected with Pride. And just flipping it really quick to have to do it virtually, it was exciting. I mean, we still had corporate participation, but we also had families that were able to participate and celebrate. They could do like 15-minute segments because we had a virtual Pride parade, which we're like, what's that? And so we kind of built the plane. We jokingly said we built the plane while it was in the air, because we have like this well-oiled machine that we've been doing for decades now, practically, and it's just in person. And so to have to try to go like, hey, technology, Zoom, whatever, what are we going to do? So we were able to open it up to families and open it up to other segments who would be standing on the sidelines. And so that was kind of exciting and different. And I think if there's any silver lining, is that we've been able to embrace technology more and reach a broader audience than we might have been doing in person before. So with that, I'll stop.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think that's actually a good segment and segue into the next question. Just, what has your experience with community been? I know for myself, I already said, it's been really hard for me to find other people who are trans, non-binary, people who go by they, them pronouns, and, that lack of community, especially growing up in a place where I had zero community, really, it's hard. So what has your experience been, and how can we make it better? What obstacles have been there? Everyone feel free to just hop in.
I can start with that one. So I'm originally from San Diego, and I would say that the queer community out there was very different for me than it looks like here. It was in 2013, and I was in a partnership with a woman that was in the military. So a lot of my life could not be known. So therefore, if you're in the closet to a lot of people that are in your life, how do you build community while it's in secret? So in 2014, when a lot of things changed and we could kind of, find ourselves and our relationship, moved to Colorado, and the Denver queer scene was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It felt like it was everywhere, and yet I didn't know how to access it. And I would say, honestly, it wasn't until I started it Out Front where I completely embraced my identity. I put myself into community spaces because I wanted to establish those connections and meet people that were like me, but also people that were different than me. And I honestly don't know what I would say to do differently, because I think everyone is on a different path in terms of accepting who they are, wanting to find like-minded people, and then also wanting to push themselves to grow in themselves. And community is so important in order to be able to do that. But I would say that when I was ready, I felt like the community was there for me.
And just going off that, because I think I was a little surprised, when I think it was a really good way of saying, Denver, it feels like there's community everywhere, but it's like, how do you access it? So do you have any recommendations for, how people can access community without, being, a part of Out Front magazine and, obviously very accepting of your identity, but yeah, what would you recommend?
Definitely. Well, and that's one thing too, is I've been able to find and locate different resources based off of, I think, the comfortability and the desire of each person. And I do believe that going virtual has created or almost established a stronger community in the last 3 to 4 months. People really are looking for that support. So I've seen a lot of different Facebook groups pop up, or a lot of, Zoom conversations, even at, I think the MSU campus, they have a lot of conversations that they invite, relatively segmented groups of the community to be able to open up conversation to create a safe space. And then there's groups at large where people can just have general connection and, maybe even over Zoom have a cup of coffee with somebody, and it feels a little bit more accessible because you're not forced to enter into an environment that you might not know someone. So I definitely think that that's been like a big shift that I've noticed. But also just programs at the center, I think, are huge. Being able to join in discussion groups and, maybe put yourself out there in a way that is safe, but exposing yourself maybe to people that you wouldn't normally run into out in the world.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's like, it feels like there's, the LGBTQ community is like everywhere. You see like rainbow flags in Cap Hill, and I'm like, hey, where's everybody at? You want to be friends? And I think like what I found in the last year or so, like trying to be more intentional about building, queer community around me, it's been a slow build. It's been through, for me, through comedy, through yoga, through like my passions and hobbies. But then it's just like, I can go and meet queer people, but then it's like that next step of like being really vulnerable and just like being like reaching out for coffee, or like, do you want to hang out? Like, I'm looking for more friends, and then just building from there, which is like so basic, but it feels like very hard to do, especially for me as an adult, like making friends as an adult outside of a college setting or an office setting, things like that. It feels really vulnerable. But I think the shift with COVID, obviously that makes like bumping into people casually out like pretty impossible. No one's trying to meet new people, it feels like. But I've tried to shift and look at like what I have digitally, Instagram, different apps. There's an app, called Lex that is for queer women, non-binary folks, trans men, that I have used to meet people and make new friends, connect through Instagram. And I think, trying to make digital connections, even if they're not here in Denver. I've met a lot of people across the country and even across the world through like Lex and through different things on Instagram. And I've tried to reframe, how I view my connections and as things maybe open up and people start to come together in person, TBD on that, I really want to be open to like meeting new people and making friends, even though it does sometimes just feel really awkward, somebody's got to reach out, right? So that's my tips, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely kind of sounds like, you know, you think about Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, Her. My God, that app, Her.
No.
Oof.
Ugh.
But, you know, I feel like queer people, we definitely, you know, we are really great at building community online because we've been forced to build community online. And, you know, a lot of people are forced to either hide who they are, or they're not comfortable with it, or their environment isn't, you know, accepting, or, you know, whatever the reason is. I think there is that scariness of like putting yourself out there. So, you know, how do we make that easier and lower stakes for people? How do we, you know, make more spaces that aren't just solely driven by, you know, alcohol and drugs, and, you know, like we're already disproportionately more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs. So I don't know. I think it's definitely interesting if anyone has anything to add to that or to say of their own.
I think touching on that, something in regards to community that's been really hard for me. I come from California, Missouri. So as you can imagine, it's like 2 cows and like, that's it. So, you know, very small, no community whatsoever. Okay, yeah. So I have, oh my God, I just had friends from Cape that were visiting me. But that's funny. So really rural. I mean, completely just, they still think COVID is all a hoax, you know, like, so you can just imagine the people that I grew up around, the things that I heard that were just ingrained in me, and the outs and escapes that, you know, people find to try to build that community, or to try to just like find anybody or everybody that will relate to them in some capacity. And, you know, you just go through that time period just collecting and collecting and collecting all these people, but never really knowing who they are, you know, deeper down besides the surface level of, we can all just get messed up and have a good time and, you know, throw glitter on each other or whatever. And so I think that's been something that's coming into my 30th year, has been like one of the biggest challenges for me, is kind of cutting the fat in the community that I'm, you know, that I am tied to, and not wanting to just be the face, you know, another white gay man that's the face of the queer community, because that's, again, you know, since the revolution of Marsha P. Johnson, you know, throwing that brick, it's just like, cool, thanks for doing that for us, we'll take it from here. And then, you know, we just kind of overran everything with whitewashing everything. And I think, you know, these conversations now, and making it where it is virtual, and where, you know, there's not as many physical spaces for you to go, it's like, you have to really sit down and like kind of reevaluate yourself and the people around you, and making those intentional spaces for people that are not white gay men. You know, like, it's definitely a burden on myself and others that identify, you know, at the higher level of despair, you know, like least disparaged within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Lauren, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so Austin is great because, you know, obviously it's super, well, I mean, it claims to be very accepting, and it, you know, it is like more so than a lot of other places, but at the same time, it is also really hard to find community, at least I've found that, well, I would say for white gay men, it's very easy in a sense. That's definitely the most prominent community here from what I've found. And, you know, so I graduated from college like 3 years ago. And so in college, I went to school here at St. Edward's, and they used to call it the closet on the hilltop because everyone there is some sort of queer, and it's actually kind of true. All of my friends from school ended up being gay, so, or trans or something. So, you know, that part was great. However, moving forward from that and trying to find, you know, new friends after they've all moved away has been really hard. And I have only just started making new friends in the community because you know, stuff happened and I got on Tinder and, you know, started swiping away. And I actually have made a new group of, you know, queer women friends who are all around my age, and that's awesome. But it's super rare to find. And I feel like I shouldn't have to resort to a dating app, especially one like Tinder, to find just friends. You know, I mean, I'm not necessarily looking for anything, but it's like I want to just be able to make friends who are, you know, around my age and who I can identify with and relate to. And so that's kind of something that I'm still trying to navigate is one, now that I am in a relationship and don't want to be on Tinder, you know, how else am I supposed to make new friends other than, you know, yes, I can like kind of creep through Instagram and try to find people within there. And luckily, my new group of friends, they are kind of interconnected and they have a lot of other gay friends, so it's easy to go find. But at the same time, I wish there was something like, I mean, we don't even have a bar here other than maybe like Cheer Up Charlie's that is just for, you know, gay women. So it's really hard, you know, to find that space, or at least it's not readily available. So, you know, that's something that I've always wanted to, you know, try to help and create. It's funny because one of my best friends, he works for Bumble, and so I get to hear about all of their, you know, initiatives and everything, and Bumble BFF seems really cool, except, you know, you can't really, you can filter down on some things, but I kind of wish you could filter bisexuality in a way, you know, or at least filter, I don't know. I mean, not that I don't want to be friends with straight people, and straight people are great too, but you know, it's also, you know, if I want to initially or intentionally find people in the community, there should be an easier way to do that without just, you know, trying to go on dates and having it not work out and being friends or something like that, you know. So that's kind of my very, you know, small perspective of it. It's hard to speak for the greater perspective because I feel like coming from college and transitioning into adulthood, you know, or my young adult life, I'm still really trying to navigate that. So if y'all have any other tips, let me know.
Yeah, and I guess piggybacking off of that as well, you know, what have been those activities or events or groups that you guys have joined that has made a difference? And, you know, I definitely want to hear from JD and Veronica about, you know, how are you guys creating community? And, you know, that goes for David as well. How are you guys creating community how are you creating community? Let's stop there.
I'll start off. So with my work with the Queer Resource Network, my company's about 10 years old, and they've had, you know, kind of grassroots initiatives for all of these, you know, underserved populations throughout the inception, but making it official and having that, you know, executive oversight and having, you know, more larger stakeholders come into that. I think that that's definitely where a lot of that comes into play in creating that community and creating those safe spaces, knowing that, you know, you can come in and have any sort of a background as long as you're trying to respect others. With us shifting, you know, right up and, you know, 2 weeks before Pride was canceled, and having already been working a few months on what are we doing with Pride initiatives, again, with a global company. So we have multiple outlets of these resource networks. So, you know, working with the other leaders of those areas, you know, on a global footprint of what's Cape Town, South Africa doing for their, you know, Pride, and then having to switch it all over. I think everybody within my company we didn't really have any hesitation of just completely turning it over to the Black Engagement Network and creating an entire Pride Month that pretty much only, I would say 99% only included, you know, are uplifting or giving the platform over to people of color or trans non-binary individuals. And that's really what we did for the entire month of June, was just create an entire month where all of these people were buying in and, you know, reaching out to their networks outside of that. So, you know, we had drag queens from South Africa, we had drag queens from the West Coast, we had, you know, individuals come in, do presentations over, you know, the movements and, you know, just the tie-ins. Again, speaking back to that intersectionality, it's a verb, and, you know, people are like, oh, I'm so intersectional, but it's like, what are you actually doing? Are you learning something? Are you voicing something? And so really just trying to make the platforms just open. I think that's the biggest thing. Again, with the face of the community, it's just historically been a white man, and the virtualness has really, I can't imagine if, you know, me growing up as a kid would have been able to accidentally stumbled upon Denver Pride, you know, on the internet, and been able to do that in secret like everything else, but still, you know, being able to just like have any sort of a connection to that community that I didn't even know I needed.
Well, and I know for Out Front, that's been something since over the last year, and I would say maybe even the last 2 years, that we've really been intentionally focusing on more intersectional issues. I know that for a long time, the editor-in-chief as well as the marketing director were cis gay white men. And a lot of times there was sort of like a relationship or a marriage, if you will, between the bars and the publication. So a lot of times we would only be covering what was happening at the bars and in the nightlife and drag. And essentially that was kind of all we were known for. Coming in the last year, now it's an all-female editorial team, myself and then my editor-in-chief. And we came in with a direct mission of, please inform us of what you feel the gaps are that Out Front is not covering. What are we not attending? What is important to you? What are the issues that you want to see in these pages? Because we are here to create community and to represent and to provide a platform for these stories. And so even just doing that research, I think looking internally, and even though that wasn't a team that I was a part of 3 years ago, the last 43 years, that's been our perception. So I think even rebuilding that trust with the community has been huge. Trying to mend, you know, relationships where maybe people felt like we did not carry out our end of the bargain, or they did not feel that we were there for them. I think looking at ourselves and our history and really intentionally wanting to change that perception has created community. I know that we've attended way more and different diverse events than ever before, because we want people to feel like we're here for them. We want to hear their stories. And it's because we do. Like that's my mission, and that's my goal, is to offer this platform to those people that aren't getting the chance to speak for themselves. We're not here to speak for people. Since COVID, definitely things had changed in the ways that we could physically be in the space with community. But we did create this online forum or group on Facebook called The Outsiders. And it was basically just a way to share resources. Here, you know, if you're having difficulty accessing your HRT, here's, you know, 4 phone numbers that you can call tomorrow that you can get an appointment, get in to see a doctor, and, you know, do whatever you need to do. And if you need support, if you need help, we're here for you. We'll find something if that's not enough. You know, like different kinds of things like that, I think, and just shedding some perspective and some light, trying to create a space not only that can inform people, but that also people feel like their opinions and their voice matters. We had more than 500 people join in the first 3 days that it was open. And so I think that really proved to us, A, that people look to us and trust us, but that this is so needed. So I know that coming out of COVID and you know, getting involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, that has really proven to us that we are headed in the right direction, because we are now one of the first people that gets the phone call when somebody wants their story told, and that wasn't happening before.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, you know, for sure. You know, what we're seeing with COVID and everything, you know, we saw a lot of brands realizing that they have to really start working on their transparency and, you know, their trust in rebuilding that, because a lot of that has been broken. Yeah, and Lauren, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just saying that was awesome.
That was awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess, yeah, David, if you have any opinions on that as well.
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to monopolize time because historians are typically long-winded, but I'm going to provide a quick resource. Can I do a quick screen share? Is that okay, hosts? Okay, so this is a book called Selling Out by Alexandra Chasson, and she is pretty brutal with the gay and lesbian movement, such that it was in the 2000s. There's a whole chapter about how there's a common misperception that the only way one can participate in Pride is through dollars, and how there's a conflation of queer votes with queer dollars, basically saying that it marginalizes people who don't have access to jobs or education or experiencing homelessness or doing sex work or who are otherwise generally working class or poor. What Chasen does a really good job of in this is calling for solutions. And even though the whole book is about how the gay and lesbian movement, and she does take the gay and lesbian print industry to task in the 90s, like The Advocate having these all white models and how that reproduces gay, white, cisgender male culture and is racist, and she's correct. And she takes Colorado's boycott in 1992 in the wake of Amendment 2 and argues whether or not that was really effective. But ultimately what she calls for is a queer socialism. In fact, she says that all queer people everywhere, because all these problems stem from a sense of economics. And what she says is we should really be calling for working class solutions, unions, living wage, movement solidarity with other marginalized groups, apprenticeship programs, two-year colleges, as well as collective ownership of land and cooperative ownership of businesses, which, like the gender binary in businesses, are bad words. Communism is like gender queer. It doesn't really have a place in the business world. Johnny, I can't see you right now, but I know you're smiling. So long story short, I'd strongly recommend getting this $3 book. Another resource I want to show you is this. So this is Julian Eltinge, and being the historian, I couldn't help but look this up. Julian was a famous female impersonator, and this is him at 17th and Broadway in Denver in about 1915, shortly before the 1918 pandemic. And what struck me about it is the question, how do queer people organize in the face of a public pandemic or anti-queer laws? Now, the 1910s and 1920s weren't as harsh as you think, right? It was about akin to the 1980s or 1990s. You could be out, but not necessarily publicly. It's not until the 1930s that stuff starts to really get bad. But it's drag shows, right? If you wanted to experience community post-pandemic, you went to places where queer people were, or where queer people could be expected to be. And Julian Eltinge was so popular that he had a show, and shortly after this, he started his vaudeville silent movie career. I think there's an argument for using technology to create queer public spaces. Now, the technology, of course, then was the movie theater, which also became a place that gay men started hooking up. I don't know what that's all about. You can ask me questions later. But long story short, I also think there's an over-reliance on technology. What if someday China drops a bomb on us that's an EMP and destroys the internet? What are we going to do then, right? That's a possibility. I mean, that's a legitimate thing. The internet could go away, right? And all of this wonderful organizing, we're going to have to recreate. But people and humans are resilient creatures. So I think the best way to do it is still person to person. But thirdly, I want to share a resource that is really, really, really important to me. So for Lauren, you especially, you may like this. This is a meetup group created by queer people in Colorado, and there's like 5,000 members, but it's an umbrella page from multiple different groups. I don't know if there's anything like it in Austin, but I went with a friend of mine who's a gender non-binary bisexual woman, and they tell me that, you know, for gender non-binary bisexual women, being in a queer space is like being in a gay bar, right? It's like looking through the windows of a gay male bar and being like, let me in, I want to have some fun. And then the queer cisgender white body type people are telling you, no, you can't come in here. I think that it's up to us to recreate spaces on our own. And then when I'm looking at all of these other things, you know, how can brands be like, how can brands do better? Well, look at Colin Kaepernick, right? Look at what happened with the NFL. When they said it was bad for business, Nike picked him up and said no, right? That's probably because they had an African-American person in power or someone who knew the story and was like, we're not dealing with this racist shit anymore. I think going back to Chasen's stuff, what we have to consider is a queer socialism that by her own account is intersectional, based on feminist principles and socialist principles, because really what we're fighting for are solutions to these economic problems, right? Created by stratified capitalism, where you have a very, very few wealthy people and a whole lot of poor people, and the middle class keeps getting pushed farther and farther. So there are solutions, right? It's like living wage, it's more public housing, it's a free 2-year education. It's creating a society and an organized America that looks more like Germany and South Korea, which are better places to do business because they have social systems to support the exigencies of capitalism. And that's a lot in just a few minutes, but to create space and how brands can do better are to support those working class values, are to support those principles. And in fact, all of the marginalized groups, all of the different identity prides, right? So Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, Gay Pride, they were all created roughly about the same time because those were self-determinative acts in the 1960s and 70s by marginalized groups, Latinos, African Americans, Chicanos, gay people. And also we have to look at gayness itself, right? Queerness itself. Right? Gayness was constructed in the 1970s largely as a gay, white, and male classification. We have to expand based on the work that we're doing now. Look at the space which has been created just by creating more inclusive language, multiplicity of self-pronouns, right? Multiplicity of businesses. I don't know. I really think this comes down to all of us pushing for better working class values and better working class programs like I just mentioned. So that's all I have to say.
Damn, you definitely are a historian, huh? All right, that was jam-packed with information. Yeah, I like how you brought it back to brands and what they can be doing. And, you know, I agree. I think it's definitely those big brands that have seen, you know, such great ROI on just simply supporting the queer community and all of the positive engagement and reactions that they get from that. I think, you know, it's hard when there is this stigma around, you know, we don't want to look unprofessional, or we don't want to associate our brand with that. We don't want to take a stance. You know, how do you combat that? What do you do? What do you tell brands? What do you ask of them? You know, is it asking too much?
One of the things that you know, obviously the country, we don't have rights everywhere. And so the one really positive thing I will say about business is that they stepped up when our federal government wasn't, you know, especially around workplace equality, you know, signing, you know, pushing the envelope in states where they didn't have protections. And so companies were saying, I don't care whether the city, I don't care whether the state, I don't care whether the country doesn't have protections for my employees. I give a damn, and I'm going to make sure that we do everything that we can. And some had more access, had more resources, and can push harder and reach people in spaces where they could potentially influence. But, you know, but the same can be said on the other end of the spectrum, where there are companies that are horrible and that do not support equality whatsoever, don't, you know, racist values, homophobic, transphobic, you know, sexist. I mean, so it's on a wide gamut of whether we've got these highly inclusive organizations or these, you know, folks that are just horrible. But at least we're getting laws, and laws can only go so far. I mean, that doesn't necessarily change the culture either. It says, oh, we're going to smack your hand, but unless someone literally says faggot to you or tranny or something like that, these horrific words, you may get out of, you know, it's harder sometimes to push back. So I think companies in certain ways can step in where government isn't, and, you know, and they can be challenging in that regard as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Corporate responsibility, I think, is like the biggest push, honestly. You know, we've worked at the government for how many generations now, and worked. It's too big of a beast at this point I mean, you know, we see changes. We see, again, those appeasement laws passed. Oh, we had marriage equality. And then, I mean, for a lot of the gay or queer community, that was like a big accomplishment, and like, oh, we're done. And then, so if your own community is thinking that, think of what every single other person is thinking, that it's not a part of that community. You guys are good. What are you worried about? Why are you yelling at us? You know, there's so many other things that need to be done. And I think that's where I you know, have really kept with my company and those guiding principles, and, you know, seeing my CEO kind of break down, having these conversations of, these are hard conversations. And if your CEO isn't having it, if your leadership isn't having it, if they're not having it directly with you, then it's not going to change. And so, you know, I think that that's another thing with, again, with the internet, the beautiful thing of it is they're going to find you and they're going to make you obsolete. So, you know, kind of just keeping the course and hoping that those companies that are like that are just, going down the road and by the wayside, and these companies like, with 2U, it's the leading within the globe. It's the largest company that does what it does at such a high capacity, and with the improved technology that moving forward. And it's kind of, how are you harnessing that technology to bring all of these degree programs with universities, boot camp, short courses, all of these different means of education, and trying to get them to people that aren't able to get them. But again, I think, I know with the technology, like it's here for right now. Is it always going to be here? No, but use it as much as you can while we have it.
I guess on this topic, I do fundamentally agree. I guess I would personally kind of hesitate to personify corporations as good or bad. I think that kind of like attributes more kind of like a human life code of ethics that I don't think is there. And I think there are obviously corporations that like have a worse or better impact. Like that is, yeah, I would never deny that. I think that they're like, at the end of the day, it is fundamentally about profit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think that I notice a lot of corporate, I guess the corporations with policies, like what it seems like James is describing, where it's like pretty, welcoming and accepting. I noticed there's a lot of accessibility problems along class lines, and I'm no class reductionist, but I guess I have kind of a discomfort with that mindset, because think of places like Starbucks or Target, which on the one hand, like they did bring workplace protections into states that just didn't have them. And I know Starbucks has a really good healthcare policy. Like there are a lot of benefits, but at the same time, they are underpaying their people pretty significantly. They are like consigning people to, a kind of a worse life. And statistically, queer people are much more likely to be in the role of people being kind of pushed down by that system than people who are being uplifted by it. I'm tangled on a string.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think, again, making sure that transparency is clear. My company went through 5 years ago, the entire board was white men, and I think there was 2 women. This year they just did it. Half of it is now women and people of color. And then, same moving through with executive leadership, going through and having, there's these corporations that were built long ago, or there's these systems that were built long ago, but now going in to hone in and refine on those systems and figure out, okay, my company went through and changed all the languages to not have any binary whatsoever within all of its documentation within, so like, again, the transparency I think is really crucial, because Starbucks, everybody loves a cold brew, but they do some not good things for their people, and you kind of have this like balance thing here. Well, like they did this, but then they're doing this. So it's like, who do you support? How do you know who to support?
Yeah, absolutely. And just so you guys know, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to be wrapping up, but I'll let everyone kind of give last thoughts if you'd like. I mean, everything you guys are saying, absolutely true. And I definitely agree with you guys on that. And, I think one huge thing that I actually took away from South by Southwest with Lauren, where I met Lauren, but when it comes to marketing and branding, diversity isn't a checklist, but rather a culture. Mindfulness is an important practice. If the community you are talking about is not at the table, stop. So I think, there's a lot to be said about corporate responsibility and, intentionality behind our consumer dollars, and, just making sure that we're supporting businesses that are supporting us, and, that our values are aligned and that we're all headed towards the same end goal. And with that, if anyone would like to add, feel free. You guys a few seconds.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick branch off of that. It's funny because you can notice, so whenever statements are being made on behalf of people rather than by, the people who they're trying to represent and they're trying to, give a voice to, in a sense. you know, especially with everything that's happening right now, you know, and companies just giving statements and, you know, sometimes trying to do that checkbox of, you know, hey, I'm here, I support, you know, don't cancel culture me type of thing, you know. But it's so obvious whenever there's no representation and they're just trying to speak on behalf of people and, you know, say, oh yeah, we're in solidarity, you know, this is happening, but then they're not actually doing anything, you know, about it beyond that. Anyways, that's just something that I've noticed recently. I'm like, come on, y'all.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just do a quick plug for two things? One, Outfront has got great resources for community. So I definitely found, I was looking for a queer kickball group. And so they've got a huge listing of resources. And then on our website, which is lgbtqcolorado.org, we have a resource tab. And so we've got a lot of different queer resources, anything from, you know, you're looking for a doctor, looking for an attorney, looking for groups, social groups, what have you. We, you know, certainly want to have those resources readily available for you. And then if you own a business or you know, want to promote, there's free ways to do that on our website as well. So I invite you to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. And just so you guys know, next Thursday, we will have our second chat, which will be equality and equity. And yeah, if you guys want to tune in, if you want to be a part of it, please definitely reach out to me. And all of the notes from this conversation will be on the agenda towards the bottom. And yeah, with that said, thank you everyone so much for coming out. And yeah, we look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great to meet everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right,
Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye.
Bye.